back to infect the airwaves with our unique blend of fantasy baseball enlightenment on RotoRob Fantasy Baseball Weekly Podcast, heard every Thursday evening at 9 p.m. EST on Blog Talk Radio. We're just wrapping up April now, which means we're less than 6 weeks away from the 2015 MLB Draft. This week, Adam Wainwright he came on record saying he doesn't believe the National League should move to a designated hitter format despite what happened to him. Masahiro Tanaka wound up on the DL. And Mike Scioscia thinks Josh Hamilton was wrong for not showing remorse to those Angels teammates that stuck by him during his troubles. We're going to cover some of these stories and many more over the next 45 minutes or so pull up a beanbag chair and get comfy. I'm RotoRob, and my guest this week is Peter Kreutzer, a.k.a. RotoMan, the man responsible for bringing you both the annual fantasy baseball and football guides so beloved in our circles. How are you this evening, Peter?
I'm good, Rob. How are you?
Well, I'm not doing as well as the Cubs, who are not only off to a superb start, but just got cleared of tampering accusations when they hired manager Joe Madden, so all is good in the land of Wrigley. Now, I want to remind you the chat room and phone lines are open. Right now, it is just me in the chat room. Feel free to join me, anyone. And guests, if you want to call in and chat with us, you can do so by calling 347-826-7358. Now, before we get to this week's news, I'm just going to quickly run down what's going on over at RotoRob.com. On the baseball side of things, every Sunday we have the Wire Troll, written by MLB editor Michael Seff, this week highlighting Luis Valbuena. On Saturday, we released our third base rankings. Our outfield rankings are being worked on, designated hitters as well, and soon starting pitchers to wrap up this year's positional rankings. Football. Yesterday at McCade, Pearson discussed his picks for the top 12 players from the upcoming draft, starting today, obviously tonight, who are going to have the most fantasy value over the next few years. Hockey, on Sunday, we released our Wire Troll All-Star team. And in basketball, with the playoffs underway, watch for the Wire Troll All-Star team soon, just currently being formatted. We'll have that out within the next couple of days. Games, nothing new this week, but new games being added, so check back soon. We are now from 4,100, so should hit that mark in mid-May, if not sooner. Finally, don't forget to like the RotoRob Facebook page. We're just 13 shy of 925 likes, so come and join the party and get plenty of Facebook exclusive content. Even RotoMan is one of those likes. Any Facebook pages we should know about that you run, Peter?
Well, we've started to put a little bit of effort into the Tout Wars Facebook page, and we also have a Patton and Co. Facebook page where I show up every once in a while. There's not that much activity there, but if you liked it, we would definitely use it more.
All right, well there you go. Everyone out there, like Patton and Company and the Tout Wars Facebook pages. Run to your computer and do it right now as soon as the show's done. All right. Top story this week, Masahiro Tanaka. I know neither of us are going to find this very surprising, but he is out at least a month because of wrist tendonitis and a mild forearm strain. Essentially what happened on Tuesday, he pitched as usual between starts bullpen session, and afterwards complained of soreness in his wrist. They sent him for an MRI, which showed the in the wrist strain. They're unclear whether this is connected to the slight tear in his UCL, but we all know that forearm strains are very often a precursor to Tommy John surgery. Fortunately, the MRI did not show any new damage to the elbow, but this is not a good situation, clearly, Peter. Your thoughts on the Tanaka situation?
Well, coming in, we all knew that he and Yu Darvish it was kind of a road race to figure whose elbow would go out first. Tanaka won that one, but it didn't mean that he was he was in the clear. This is maybe not as bad as it could have been, but we don't know. And we often see with these forearm strains, and then coupled with the wrist tendonitis, and he already has the UCL tear, that this could easily in a month turn out to be something that begs for surgery. But maybe not.
Yeah.
And we don't know enough to know if that's a possibility. But he could come back and pitch again. He's shown early this year that he can be an effective pitcher pitching with the elbow. So if he gets a little healthy again, maybe he'll get another month or two in before something else happens.
True. The Tigers' David Price came out this week and said he thinks the cold weather that Tanaka pitched in last week in Detroit contributed to him landing on the DL. Any substance to that, do you think, Peter?
I don't know. There's so many variables of that nature. Certainly, the biggest factor is the stress on the arm throwing as hard as these guys throw, and it's an unnatural motion. It's one that puts stress on the elbow. If anything gets out of whack at all, it's almost a foregone conclusion that most elbows are going to get hurt. So whether cold doesn't help, but I don't. I think it's hard to say it's any one particular thing in any case. It's something that happens. It's something that happens, and they're not going to not play the games because of the cold. So I'm not sure.
Of course.
What that does really.
Yeah, I'm not sure that holds any water to be. I mean, I definitely think it's tougher to get loosened up when it's cold, and it's easier to tighten your muscles up. It's much easier to warm up very quickly loose. But other than that, I just think this has been building for a while. So, of course, he's on the DL now. Won't pitch for at least a month. He won't even throw at all for 7 to 10 days. So he's not even going to touch a baseball. Now, of course, remember, last year, the Yankees shut him down for 2 months in the summer last year after the partial tear in his UCL was discovered. He did come back later in the season to make a few starts. But to me, there's real reason to be concerned about Tanaka's ability to pitch going forward. I mean, is there any doubt that Tommy John surgery is coming soon here? I can't see a way to ultimately avoid this.
Yeah, we certainly don't know everybody who has some tearing in the UCL and how quickly that leads to the more dire situation where that absolutely requires the surgery. The elbow is a much more flexible and adaptive joint, and the surgery is much more effective. With shoulders, we know the only rehab is the strengthening of the muscles around the shoulder, and that very rarely works for any protracted period of time. But the elbow is there's a little more leeway there. But there's also a surgery that fixes things in most cases, in lots of cases, which is an incentive to take care of it sooner rather than let it linger on too long in this way. So it's really going to be, if he starts throwing in 2 weeks and it's all a mess, then we're going to start getting some other types of news.
Right. We won't know anything for a couple of weeks. He's just going to let that barking calm down for a while and see what happens. But I mean, it's not as if pitchers haven't had success pitching through slight tears before. Adam Wainwright, for one. But this seems like a foregone conclusion to me. Tanaka throws a lot of sliders, not near the red flag zone in terms of percentage of his pitches, but I still feel like that could be a factor because that tends to put more stress on the elbow than any other pitch. But you mentioned that he's looked better and better as the season has progressed, which makes it a little disheartening because he did have a slow start and seemed to be coming around now. So that's a little disappointing. So the Yanks have brought up Chase Whitley. He was brought up to give the Yankees originally an extra day of rest because they don't have very many off days coming up. But now he's going to stay in the rotation indefinitely. Anything to see there, Peter?
Well, I have him on my American League team, and I picked him up in the reserve round, and I certainly hope that there's something there. But he's not a big strikeout guy. He's not an overpowering guy. He seems to have some skills. He's going to be tested, and he pitched a pretty decent game yesterday. So if they can protect him a little bit, and maybe he'll do a decent job filling in. I think there's a reasonable chance that that's going to be the case. He's not a accident waiting to happen, let's say.
Yanks are very surprising, currently in first place in the American League game. So they definitely have to think about 2015, which means bringing in reinforcements at some point, whether that be Cole Hamels or what have you. One thing I'm curious about, a guy I own in my keeper league, so I've been keeping a very close eye on him, and the way he is pitching at Double-A, is Luis Severino. I don't want the Yankees to rush him on the one hand, but on the other hand, he has just been dynamite down there. Any talk at all that we could see him later this year?
I don't think that's in part of the plan, but he is one of their top prospects, and he's got mad skills, and if we see it all the time. A young pitcher with great skills can come in and do the job for a while. At what cost, of course, is always the question, and so I don't know. I find the Yankees a little bit hard to read how they're handling these things. They go all over the place from time to time, based on I'm not always sure what, but a guy succeeding in Double-A, a team that needs a pitcher, that's somebody who's going to get called up, especially at some point.
Yeah.
How's that for a non-answer? How's that for a non-answer? I don't really know.
It's a fair answer given what you just outlined in terms of the Yankees' philosophies, which have run the gamut. I mean, we had, of course, the free spending Yankees for years and years. Then let's get into the luxury tax Yankees. Let's get into the luxury tax. But then we still see them spending freely in many cases, and I don't know. The ironic last week at the time I was impressed by his start against the powerful Tigers, how he shut them down. But even at that time, I did couch my enthusiasm with saying, give him a couple starts, like now that he's starting to roll, and I said, float him out there. I advise selling high. And I really hope people listen, because at the time I said he's a ticking time bomb. And I didn't expect that to happen before my next podcast, but sure enough, and that was definitely right on the money. Tanaka's ERA is up about half a run in the early going, but he's reduced his home run rate. What do you think we can expect from him going forward in terms of results, assuming he comes back this year?
In terms of Tanaka, I think he'll be, as long as he's healthy, he's a solid pitcher. He's both got great stuff and he knows how to use it. If he's really hurting, then all bets are off. But if he's deemed healthy enough to come back, I would expect him to be effective until he gets hurt again. And that's the case with every pitcher, really. But it's I think if he's really hurt, they're not going to run him back out there. They'll have him have the surgery and get him back for, I guess 2017, which seems.
Yeah, well, that would be wise. You do have a lot of money tied up in this pitcher, and he's only 26 years old, so he's got a future ahead of him. We're not talking about a Cliff Lee type situation where Tommy John surgery would essentially end his career. So, yeah,
right.
That makes sense.
The timing here, and this is based on the very skeletal information that they released today, but the timing, if you think about Matt Harvey's return from Tommy John, he had the surgery early in I think it was in May. So by the time, he kind of worked through a lot of that early return jitters last year, and he's come back and he's pitching pretty well. They're not talking about pitch count limits too much, and he's pretty much healthy at this point. I think doing it sooner rather than later puts Tanaka back on a time frame that gets him back for 2017, rather than coming back in 2017 like Jose Fernandez is, and missing half the year and then having to struggle to get back a little bit. So yeah. I don't know how much they can manage that, but we won't really know anything for 2 to 4 weeks when we see when he starts throwing again and how the rehab goes.
True that. Just a reminder, you're listening to RotoRob Fantasy Baseball Weekly podcast featuring guest Peter Kreutzer tonight. And now a quick word from our sponsor, Side League, offering daily fantasy contests with no salary cap, no sharks, and no hassle. Win money while you trash talk your friends. Visit sideleague.com and download our app for Android or iPhone today. Enter promo code RotoRob for a free $5 deposit now. Side League, fantasy sports for everyone. Now, let's get to this afternoon's games. Just 2 afternoon games, very quiet day in baseball. I'll lead things off with the Phillies and Cardinals, a game that was won easily by St. Louis, 9-3, although it was close early on. The Mats led the way for the Cards. Carpenter and Adams definitely did their thing today as the Cards won their 3rd straight to open up a 2.5-game lead in the NL Central. Adams had 3 hits, including a go-ahead 2-run homer. Tim Cooney was called up to make his major league debut for the Cardinals, but he only lasted 2 1/3. Cards were still able to overcome this with some great bullpen work. Adams is up to 14 RBI in the year now. The Cards got off to a 13-7 start this season, but were only scoring 3.7 runs per game. 3 games ago, they decided to drop Carpenter just second in the batting order, and my God, that's made a difference. They've won each game, scoring 25 runs in that stretch. They really picked up the offense now with Carpenter hitting in the 2-hole. So for the Phillies today, Darren Ruff held the big stick, going 2 for 3 with a run and an RBI, a walk, a strikeout. He led off the 3rd with a solo homer. That's his 4th RBI of the year, bringing his slash line up to 179, 250, 410. Yuck. Hadn't had a hit in a week, but then again, he's just not getting much playing time, and he seems to be regressing year by year. This is a guy we had some serious hopes for, say, 2-3 years ago, but it's just not happening. David Buchanan was the starter for the Phillies. He lasted just 4 1/3 and was ripped for 8 hits and 7 earned runs, walked 3, struck out only 1, gave up a homer, had to throw 76 pitches, and he dropped to 0-5 with a very unsightly 8.76 ERA. History in the good way. Phillies pitcher to lose his first starts in a season since Kyle Abbott did it back in 1992. In fact, Buchanan is now 0-8 in 14 starts since he last beat the Astros on August 6th for his last win. So he is searching desperately for a W, and it's not going well. And with Chad Billingsley rehab going well at AAA, I think Buchanan's days in the rotation might be numbered. For the Cardinals, as I mentioned, Carpenter had a huge day. 2 for 3, 3 runs, RBI, 2 walks, a double. Got his 14th RBI. He is now slugging .651, having spent most of the year batting leadoff. I mean, really? 21 runs in 21 games, 7 runs in the last 4, driven in a run in 3 straight games as well. Here's a question for you, Peter. Guess how many multi-hit games Carpenter's had through the first 21 games of the season?
This is a wild guess. I would say 8.
How about 15?
15? My goodness.
Out of 21. I know that is hot. I mean, this guy is hot. He's also walked 10 times now as well. So that's not easy to do, drawing all those walks and getting multiple hits. Well, he doesn't have a steal. That's no big surprise. It's really the only thing he doesn't do. If Matt Carpenter were even like a 10, 12 steal guy, he'd be a slam dunk first-round pick. Like, he's that good. At any rate, Cooney, as I said, lasted just 2 1/3, ripped for 7 hits, 3 runs, 1 walk, struck out 3, gave up a homer. 24 of the 52 pitches he threw were balls. Carlos Villanueva came in, retired all 10 batters he faced for the W. He's down to 0.96 and looking like a potential spot starter candidate because clearly Cooney did not get the job done. Matt Belisle came in, tossed 1 1/3 hitless innings to lower his ERA to 1.04. Randy Choate got the only batter he faced out to drop to 6.75. Seth Manis got a batter out, and then Kevin Segras wrapped it up with a shutout inning to drop to 1.86. Cardinals have one hell of a bullpen there. So, Peter, over in the American League, Angels, A's in a AL West battle. What went down there?
Well, the big story, I think in this game was the matchup. You had Garrett Richards pitching for the Angels. This was his 3rd start. He was coming back from his injury. and Jesse Chavez was who's entered the rotation for the Athletics. It was a pitcher's duel early. The Angels got out to an early lead, and then broke it open in the fifth inning. I think on a Cole Calhoun single, 2-run single in the fifth inning. Chavez was fine. He had a little bad luck there. He hasn't been starting. I think there's some stuff. He might end up being okay, but this wasn't a great example of being able to go 5 innings and stay effective. For Richards, on the other hand, whose first game back was a little dicey, his last 2 games have been very, very solid. He's had some location issues. I thought, looking at it, that he was using his 95, 96 mile an hour fastball to get ahead in the count, and then he was going to the breaking balls, both the slider and the curveball, often out of the zone and getting guys to swing or foul off or getting weak contact. It was a pretty impressive performance. I'm not sure I think he's going to have to get a little sharper in terms of his command. People are going to start laying off some of that stuff, but it looks like he's back. He's going to be maybe not as mind-blowingly solid as he was last year when he emerged, but I think it's looking good for him to have a solid year, a much better year than I anticipated when he was hurt during spring training. The other big factors in this game, on the negative side, C.J. Cron had made a abysmal attempt to catch a foul ball behind first base and foul ground, and then which he's not really a fielder, but on the other hand, he was 0 for 5 with 3 strikeouts, which if you're not a fielder and then you don't hit, your opportunities can diminish quite quickly. I've always thought he was a hitter, but he's struggling now, and the defensive liability is a concern going forward. Mike Trout, this is not in chronological order, made a great catch off of Ike Davis with the tying run on base to straightaway center field on the warning track, a sort of a twisting liner that he was able to corral over his shoulder. It was kind of a very nice catch that ended the game. Taylor Featherstone played third base for the Angels and got his first hit, and also stole his first base, and turned a fantastic double play from third base. Showed a very, very strong arm, and this is a guy who hasn't been heralded, but could be a solid utility guy for the Angels going forward, to the extent that he has a chance. Mark Canha had a 2-run home run off of Marin, which opened up an interesting situation. Richards had about 100 pitches after 6 innings. He struggled a little bit in the 6th inning, but he got through it. And then, for some reason, they brought him out to pitch the 7th. He put a runner on, and then he was taken out, and Marin gave up the home run, and that made it 6-2 at that point. The game got a little scary in the 9th inning with a rally, but Trout's game-ending catch finished that off. Ended up being a 6-5 win, with the save going to Houston Street. His 9th, once again. He gave up a run, gave up 3 hits. It wasn't an elegant one, but he got the job done thanks to the defense. And that's what I've got.
Josh Reddick do anything in that game?
Josh Reddick had 2 hits. He's having a fantastic start to the season. He's looked pretty good too. He seemed to be running. He seemed a little quicker than he was last year. But I don't know if that.
Well, especially impressive considering they didn't think he was going to start the season.
Right.
And he did start. He did wind up starting the season just a couple games late, but he actually managed to come back earlier than expected from that oblique injury. So that's great news.
Yep.
Well, as I mentioned up top, the MLB draft is coming soon. So last week we talked about number one pick and who Arizona. Now Houston's on the clock. They picked second because they failed to sign Brady Aiken last year. So the Astros actually have two of the top 5 picks this year. Now, if you're the Astros general manager, Peter, what direction are you going to head in here? What do you think is the major need?
They have 2 ways to go. I mean, I don't know who you had the Diamondbacks taking last week, but I would say that the Astros pretty much have to take the other guy. Who did you have? The
Brendan Rodgers is pretty much the clear number one, and then it gets a little muddled. I mean, it's really there's no consensus here. There's many of the different players who could go near the top. Like there's a lot of different options. There's been lots of injuries and poor performances that have hurt some of the players that are expected to go high. Draft stock is kind of going all over the place right now, so it's difficult to project. So I think at this point I'm really just looking at need. You know, I mean, there's a couple really strong middle infield candidates, but Houston has Jose Altuve at second, and soon Carlos Carrillo will be up at shortstop. So I think they're set there for years. I mean, so if you're drafting best player available and saying, I guess you go for one of those middle infielders. But if you're drafting from a position of need, I think they go with a pitcher. I like Nathan Kirby. He's a lefty out of the University of Virginia. The problem is he recently strained a left lat muscle in his abdomen and could miss the rest of the season, and that could hurt his draft status. But I really like him. There's a couple other pitchers on the board as well.
Yeah, well, I think the guy who I noted was Dylan Tate, who is is a solid arm, could help a team that is in the pennant hunt as we speak. I mean, that will probably be elusive as we move forward for this year. But I mean, they're definitely in the picture for the next few years. In the coming years, I should say. He's a guy who's going to be, unlike Brendan Rodgers, he's a guy who's going to be ready to pitch in the major leagues fairly quickly, and has dominating stuff. Whether that's whether he fills the need, the middle infielders aren't. I don't know. They're kind of stacked there. I guess they can move guys around a little bit, but there's also a couple of outfielders there, which is a place where their situation is a little dicier.
True, but I like some of the young kids. I mean, Jake Marisnick's emergence this year has been huge. I mean, they've got George Springer there as well. So I mean, they've got some good young pieces. They still have a couple pieces in the minors. There's a lot of different directions to go, but of course, because they have 2 picks, they could take an offensive player and a pitcher, so they could go both ways there. The interesting thing I found about Kirby was he was not drafted out of high school in 2012 because he was so committed to going to Virginia that he didn't even bother taking the mandatory drug testing that MLB insists on, which made him ineligible for the draft. He's just like, I'm not doing it because I'm going to college. So he didn't even care. And I don't know, I kind of respect that because a lot of times guys are committed to college, or they have signed a letter of intent to go to college, and then they get drafted out of high school and throw in a big bonus, and it's like, you know what, I'm going to skip college. But I like to see kids get an education. It's nice. This guy's got an 89 to 92 mile an hour fastball, can run up to 90. Depending on the day, 80 slider or low 80 tends to be his secondary offering of choice. Next month, Peter, May 20th, 21st, we have the owners meeting in New York. Any issues you think are most important that the owners need to go over at that time?
Well, the thing that seems to be taking the to be in the forefront is this length of game stuff, which I actually haven't seen whether games are any quicker this year with the new rules.
Well, they certainly solved that in Baltimore.
Yeah, that is a applicable solution all across the country.
Yes, It's a great business model. Let's cut off our only source of revenue.
I saw somebody today saying that they wondered if, since the beat writers often get their food at the snack stands, whether the snack stands were actually open. The concession stands were open at the game yesterday. I hadn't seen that, but it was very.
I doubt it.
It was very bizarre. Yesterday. It was very bizarre watching that game.
Yeah, I was going to talk about that actually. That whole, whether you thought that was right or wrong, but definitely pace of the play is one thing that needs to be addressed still. There's also the thing on the table is a possible expansion of the postseason, which has been talked about quite a bit, and maybe even with the result being a smaller regular schedule. You in favor of more teams going to the playoffs, Peter?
Well, I think they could definitely make the regular seasons shorter. That would be a plus. And I think coupling that with going to a 7-game series in the first round, I think that is a plus as well. What to do with the play-in game? Whether there should be more games for the wild cards? I kind of like this 1-game play-in. It really is a penalty, and yet at the same time, 1-game playoffs are exciting, and it leads to suspenseful baseball.
Last year, Kansas City, Oakland. I mean, my God, you couldn't get a crazier, more entertaining game with all the swings in every time Oakland took the lead and just kept blowing it. It was amazing.
Exactly.
And I mean, of course, Kansas City would have never had their magical run all the way. Won that 1 game.
Yeah.
It would have been a different picture. Maybe the Angels would have got through.
So going to a 7-game series is a good idea in the divisional playoffs, but adding that to the 162-game schedule it just goes on too long, and it gets too much into the cold weather. Shortening the season a little bit would be a way to approach that.
Sorry. When I said expansion of the postseason, I actually meant more teams coming into the postseason.
More
perhaps
teams
upping the number of. Right now we got 10, maybe going to 12 teams making it, adding an extra wild card.
To play 1 game or to play series? I'd have to see what the proposal is for that. But I think not mostly, but
it could result in 2-1 play-in games. You know what I mean? Like the way they did in college basketball. First they had the 1 play-in game, then they made it 2, and now it's 4.
Right.
It's just now it's a first round. It's 8 teams playing, right? To get into the round of 64. It could be. I don't know. There's lots of different things being bandied about, but it certainly increases the amount of attention in the amount of cities, like in terms of the importance down the stretch, which is a bad thing.
It's not a bad thing, and I think there's a lot to be said for making 2 separate systems, have them play a shorter regular season that gets to an enlarged. I wouldn't have a problem with an enlarged playoff system if the regular season got shorter, but it's going to lead to more anomalous outcomes to some extent. But there's always going to be those. That's part of the game, and part of what happens with when guys get hurt, guys get healthy, hot streaks, all those things. Make these teams are all pretty evenly matched. Maybe not the Phillies, but almost everybody else is kind of evenly matched. And so little differences make big differences. Makes one team 20 games over 500 and the other one 20 games below. That's a big difference. But the difference between 8 games over and 8 games under isn't necessarily that huge a difference over the course of.
It's a matter of 1 win every 2. Basically,
Right. Yeah, and all of a sudden when you look at those teams that are the Orioles are up there in the elite, but they're also 23 and 4 in 1-run games, and that's not that's not a skill really. That's
Well, it's not just. Well, it's sort of. I mean, it speaks to a very good bullpen, but it's not sustainable. It's not really something you can count on year after year. You know what I mean?
It's
I guess
things. It's like batting average on balls in play for pitchers. There's something to it. There are some things that you control, but the fact is that how those things break, they often break. They don't break based on skill completely. There's a lot of randomness built into that, and
right.
And so anyway, I'm not deriding the Orioles. They've done a great job. Buck Showalter has once again done a great job of getting into a place and then making the best of the talent that had been floundering kind of and putting it together so that it plays good baseball. That's I think a tip of the cap to him.
Praise as one of the elite managers, does he?
Yeah.
You know?
Yep.
Another possible thing that might be talked about next month is more internationalization of the game. Perhaps some regular season games in Europe, more than we've had. Like we had some games in London, I believe. And possibly a team outside of the U.S. That could be Montreal. I know that's being talked about. So I know that's definitely on the agenda for baseball to kind of, make the global move like a lot of sports want to.
Right.
So that'll be interesting. Switching gears, Cubs. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh well. So one other thing that's on that agenda is one thing that isn't that related to the collective bargaining agreement is the I say wouldn't be that related is the this international budget and the way that's been handled and the move towards trying to have to unify the draft systems in some way, which has always been kind of a mess, and which they're now trying to take control over. And the players' union doesn't have that big a stake in what happens to the players before they become players' association members. So baseball has had a little bit of a free hand with this stuff in terms of the slot values and.
Well, another issue sort of related is the whole Super 2 status thing, which causes teams to leave their best prospects down until June, which is like for purely financial reasons, which just gets really annoying and can make the difference in many cases. I mean, you look what happened. Mike Trout was finally brought up, how the Halos took off. They could have made the playoffs that year. They brought him up in April. I mean, he was that big a difference maker. We've seen situations like that before. Just to get an extra year of service out of him, and that may be a situation that needs to be addressed because it's just counterintuitive to rolling the best team out there. You know what I mean? When the rules are such that it makes more sense for us to have a worse team by not bringing up our top prospect. But anyhow, that bigger fish to fry on a different day. The Cubs, as I mentioned earlier, were cleared of tampering with Joe Madden. Tampa Bay, of course, had accused the Cubs of tampering 6 months ago before Madden opted out of his deal with the Rays. Chicago. Do you think baseball got this right, Peter, or is there more to this story?
I actually haven't followed this story at all, so I don't know. I can't talk to the rules or to the facts of what happened, so I don't know.
Well, I find it amazing it took 6 months to investigate it. That I mean, who knows what goes on behind backdoor deals, but Madden had been entrenched in Tampa Bay for many years and then suddenly opts out. And the rumors are flying that he's going to go to Chicago, and of course he winds up in Chicago. It's like, it is on the one hand hard to imagine there are not conversations going on off the record.
But what is the rule in terms of the tampering? He had the opt-out clause in his contract, and there was talk about him also going to Los Angeles, and he didn't go to Los Angeles. So
that's true.
So I don't know because
guess what's being accused that while he was on track, perhaps he was having conversations with Chicago. That I guess was what was being insinuated. There's probably rules there where it's like you can't talk to my guy unless he's opted out, or give permission for you to talk to him, which happens on many occasions.
Right. Well, so that's the thing that I don't know exactly what the rule is. I know that he had the opt-out. It seems to me once the opt-out conditions are in play, he doesn't have to opt out. he shouldn't have to opt out in order to then have the conversations. That seems like that gives you negotiating leverage to take the better to make the better choice. But as I said, I don't know the facts or what the exact rule is that they're talking about, so it's a little hard to say. It sure seems like he had the right to leave, so that any tampering is just seems like irrelevant at that point.
Perhaps. I mean, like you said, the rules are a little unclear, but I assume if Chicago had been found tampering, they probably would have been charged, like having a draft choice removed or something like that. So it's assumedly it was all in the up and up, and we can move on.
Yeah, I guess that's the other way. It's they investigated and they decided there was no story, so that's
right.
That takes care of that.
Right. I mean, not every story ends in bad news. That's good. I mean, there's still the cynic among us who may think that something was going on, but the conspiracy theorists. But who knows? We don't really know. We can just speculate. Back to the whole B-more. I'm wondering, did the Orioles make a close ball in the middle of a rioting?
Rob, you dropped out, so I didn't actually hear what question you said.
I apologize. I'm asking if the Orioles made the right call playing baseball in the middle of a rioting city. Many factors at play here, obviously, to make this decision. A lot of extenuating circumstances. But what are your thoughts on the decision to go ahead and play yesterday's game?
I guess it made me a little uncomfortable just because if they couldn't guarantee if they didn't feel comfortable having the crowd in the ballpark, it seems like they probably should have not played the game, or they should have taken the game out of town someplace else, or I'm not really sure what the benefit to the whole system was there. I think they're playing their next series. They're playing in Tampa, right? But they're going to be the home team in Tampa. So I guess the sensitivity there is that they really can't open the ballpark until things are a little more settled, a little more under control. So I don't know. I suppose it could have been a big mistake to open the ballpark, but playing the game seems like a little mistake. Like maybe there could have been another solution.
Well, I mean, Washington was talked about as a possibility. It's only 38 miles away. But, of course, allowing fans in would have potentially created a nightmare scenario. Not only that, but they would have had to divert police away from where they were needed to be at the game. And that would not have been a good idea. I mean, of course, they postponed Monday's and Tuesday's game, which they will make up as part of a doubleheader on May 28th. But to postpone a third game would have been really impossible because there would have been no chance to make it up. Chicago does not come to Baltimore again. They only come once because they're not division rivals. And basically it would have meant no days off for the rest of the year for both teams. Like, it would have really kind of screwed the Orioles and White Sox. So I don't know.
Maybe it was the best. Maybe this was the best solution. It's a very tough call. I didn't feel outraged by it at all, or it felt funny watching the game, and in the context of everything that had gone on and the things that were being said, and the release of the report, or the issuance of the report today. It only took them like 10 days to come up with a report on the murder of the death of the guy in the cop car. I don't think it's public yet, but that's anyway. I'm not making. It was a tough call either way, and you're absolutely right that they have to play the game somehow, and canceling a third game would have caused many more problems down the road. So maybe
it would have.
It was the best of a bad situation.
But I mean, there's just a surreal quality to a major league game being played in a completely empty stadium. That's just, it's really hard to wrap your head around,
Yep. Well, I don't know. There used to be some games in San Diego that were like that.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking back
in San Diego.
Yeah, I remember the early days of the Jays. I mean, after about 3 or 4 seasons into their tenure, when it stopped being interesting to go see ball games, but the team still sucked, and the stadium still sucked because they weren't yet. They were at this old exhibition bar that was horrible, and you'd see games early on in the season where you'd have 2,000-3,000 people in the stands, the point where you can hear individual people talking.
Right.
Like you don't have the din of the crowd anymore. You can hear individual people talking. It's quite funny.
Who the kiss cam is going to go to, because there just aren't that many choices.
Exactly. So you sit as far away from your friend as possible. That's all the news I had to cover tonight. Any stories that you wanted to touch on at all, Peter?
No, this has been fun. It's always nice looking at I like talking about the afternoon game. I don't know if I got across any of the essence of it, but it was fun watching it and thinking about what was going on.
Absolutely, it's fun. But before we head off the air tonight, Peter, of course, I'm going to give you an opportunity to put your pimp hat on and plug away. So what's going on in the world of Peter Kreutzer that you want anyone to know about?
Well, it's all the same things. We're running a fantastic daily fantasy game at Tout Wars this year that is going to wrap up tomorrow night. You can find the links to see who's winning, who's losing, and who's in the middle at toutwars.com. And we keep continuing to talk about baseball at pattonandco.com, which is is just a fantastic place to hang out and talk and write about the players that are you have questions about or opinions about, and we're ongoing there. And I'm answering questions at AskRotoMan.com too, so there's that as well.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for coming on tonight. I really appreciate it, Peter. Always a pleasure.
Thanks for having me, Rob. And I understand. I know we're also kicking off production on the Fantasy Football Guide 2015.
That is correct. In fact, I've already started writing both my reports. I'm just going to plug in the holes after the draft, obviously, for as things change. But I'm well into my first team and just started on my second team. So looking forward to getting back to work on that.
So the editor always likes to hear about guys working hard.
Oh, you know me. You can throw as much at me as I can take. Keep going.
Okay. Well, we'll be in the that soon.
We're going to end the show with some Sean Mulray, and we'll see you all next week. Have yourself a good evening, Peter.
Hey, take care. Bye, Rob.